Hey friends, happy start of 2025. I've had so much fun reading all of the spooky Halloween adjacent books this past year. As you will see, I've had tons of growth around the kind of books I read, the genres, and these books are in no specific order because that's just too dang hard to have to filter and rank through. So I decided to list these in the orders that I read them, starting off with my February book, Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. I have so many fond memories reading this vampire novel. It's a classic. It was written in, I think, like the early 1800s. And I'm not a big classic reader, but I really wanted something that was filled with vampires and romance in the month of February. And in some ways, this book definitely delivered. I really do think the reason why this book resonated for me, amongst many other reasons, is that I read it physically. And I read the version that was edited by Carmen Maria Machado. There was an editor's note that provided really important context to better situate this story in history and, including a lot of more modern critiques of this novel too. And then obviously a huge plus of this book are the gorgeous illustrations that are included throughout the course of the story that depict what's going on within the plot. I read this book and then immediately read it again because it is very short, and I was just so enamored with it. I understand the critiques that when it comes to the spice of this story, it doesn't go as far as many would want, but I am familiar with what is typical and deemed appropriate during the time that this book was written within the literary world of that moment. So I actually, when I read it, was pretty shocked at the lengths that it did go and where the author did take the story with its characters. So for me, I personally was asking myself, how the heck did this story get published? This led me to a whole little research journey, and then I stumbled upon several Carmilla retellings, one of which earned a top spot in my favorite books of 2024. Carmilla and Laura is a Carmilla retelling by S.D. Simper that really just goes exactly where I wish the original text would have gone. For one, it's written by a queer femme author, and I think that really does change the outcome, the product, the trajectory of this entire story. And I think it is perfect for anybody who thought that it was problematic for a man, presumably straight, to be writing a story about, all that subtext within a lesbian relationship, or maybe you wish that it did go to further spice levels. This one you should definitely pick up. It's almost identical in story to the original text, so I don't think you'd need to reread the original source material before you got to this one. Really, where this book shines is at the ending, because that was my biggest problem, so to speak, with the original Carmilla book, is that I just wish that there would have been a different outcome. Reading this story so early in 2024 and loving it taught me that I should be reading more retellings of classic novels from the perspectives of the characters who've been marginalized. So that's something I'm keeping on my list of things to do and consider in my reading for 2025. Another favorite of mine I read during the summer, and that is Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop. This book actually took me several months to finish. I think probably the bulk of June and a good chunk of July. I was in no rush. It was recommended to me by a fellow teacher friend of mine, and it completely rocked my world. And I just feel like some books are, finding you at the most perfect times in your life, because I needed to sink into this story. I needed to use the journeys of these characters to really just kind of reflect and mull over a lot of things that I was dealing with. They were just kind of reimagining what their lives could be once they've taken a second to question all these societal pressures that have put on them since they were young by their family and just like expectations from media and other kind of social circles. So I could really relate to that, how they're really questioning like, what should be my relationship to work? What is a successful life? How do I know at the end of my day that I've lived a life well lived. This book was really foundational at teaching me that I don't just exclusively read horror, that I can reflect on my life and the world through different genres. So that was a really big point for me to discover this summer. Also this summer, I read a nonfiction book that I absolutely loved. It is called The Lady from the Black Lagoon by Mallory O'Meara. This book is technically a reread for me. I read it for the first time with my eyeballs using an audiobook, but when I started to read it physically, I was shocked by how little I retained when I did listen to it, which makes a lot of sense when I think about it, because I read it during like brief moments of respite during my work day. And I've learned from then on that really I can't listen to audiobooks in short bursts. I really need to have like long stretches of time to really retain the information. So it was basically like I read it for the first time this summer. This book is just so cool. It's everything to me. It's focusing on, old Hollywood, Universal Monsters history, centering the stories of women whose contributions have long gone hidden. But this book is basically an unearthing of Millicent Patrick's story, her influence on not just Universal Monsters, but also she does have a bit of a career in Disney and working as an animator there. So it's really cool. I love how the author inserted a bit of their life into it too, as well as like the journey to figuring out the story here, putting the puzzle pieces together. I think that's really fun and a great way to remix a story that could be a little, not like the story itself wouldn't be bland, but I know a lot of people don't like nonfiction because they think it's like reading a textbook. But when you have a lot of, personal narrative and the journey itself, which was pretty challenging to find all this information and put a coherent story together, I think it does liven things up a little bit. I could see how some people would be like, why are you telling me all this about your life, author? Just give me the goods. I want to know about Millicent Patrick, and that's very valid. But for me, I really enjoyed the comparison because the value in listening to the author, who's also a part of the filmmaking industry, is that we really do see what has changed and, more importantly, what hasn't changed when it comes to the experiences of working women in Hollywood. Reading and loving this book this summer taught me that I still have it in me to read nonfiction. I'm still healing the academic trauma of being a part of a master's program, even like 2-3 years out. I really want to start getting back to my love of nonfiction. I almost used to read exclusively only that by choice. Never thought I'd see the day where I was as obsessed with fiction as I am right now, which just goes to show you that life is full of tons of surprises. Another reread that I absolutely adored in 2024 is Maeve Fly by C.J. Lead. Can we normalize rereading books? Like, this is something I'd love to see more people do, but alas, I know, myself included, we're all just like inundated by all of these new releases and backlists we're just like dying to get to. So I totally understand why people don't do it. Maeve Fly is the story of the titular character here, who is quite interesting, I would say. I mean, there's a lot about her that I also relate to. I mean, not the really dark parts of her, but she is really struggling to cope with the impending loss of somebody who's so foundational and critical to her identity as an adult. So this is a unhinged female story, and it's also very like American Psycho-esque in a lot of like the references, and I just connected to her interests, more importantly, like not necessarily her personality, to be clear, but mostly how existential she is, her love of Disney and the fantastical, because she's very nihilistic, and I love her appreciation for old Hollywood. It just perfectly put into words my adoration for these fantasy lands. Like, I love Disneyland, I love old Hollywood because of the illusion that it creates. She's so self-aware that she loves these fake, false things. I found myself, the first time I read it, a little conflicted with some uncomfortable emotions regarding the ending, and I feel like I've resolved those with this second read. However, it did kind of give me more questions about some of the motivations and intentions of a crucial secondary character. With all those new questions, maybe that means I need to read it for a third time. Another major surprise for my reading journey in 2024 was finding that I like cozy mysteries. Who am I? But apparently I do. My top favorite that I've discovered so far is going to be the Fangs and Frenemies series by Sierra Cross. This series, because I most definitely binged all of them in like a span of 2 weeks, follows a young witch as she works at a bakery. She gets into some shenanigans. Obviously, that's like the mystery part of it. But the part I love is the found family aspect to this, and romance is a part of it. It's more like a secondary thing, which I like because she's mostly on her journey trying to build her confidence and a sense of self, which I really enjoyed. But apparently, not everybody on Goodreads does. It's hilarious. There are so many low ratings for a book that I love. I don't think I've ever experienced that before. It just cracks me up to know that people have such varying and divergent reactions to a book. It's hilarious. I don't know, but it taught me that I have a capacity to enjoy romance novels and that I do like cozy mysteries. But I've tried a few more out after this one, which I got to at the start of spooky season, and I learned that I only really like cozy mysteries when there is a paranormal or supernatural element that is a big major part of the story. This next one is no surprise that it landed on my favorites list of the year, and that is The Cotton Candy Massacre Part 3 by Christopher Robertson. I've loved all of the books in this chaotic, clown-filled slasher series, but this one I think, I don't know, between the first one and this one, I do think this third one really... Okay, if I had to choose, yes, I think this third one is my favorite in this series because it's just so impressive how the author is able to give us basically a whole new cast and make us care a whole lot about them. It's so emotionally impactful. It is tugging at your heartstrings. And again, this is a slasher. It is also very funny. I've never laughed so hard in a book. Like I can't remember the last time I was hee-hee-heeing to myself the way I was. The kills were so creative even after 3 books. Still like in awe of this author's creativity. And just again, like these characters, they just felt so real and the relationships were so well developed. It was sad, it was gripping. I love the ending and I'm waiting, trying to be patient about the 4th and I think final installment in this series. I'm so hyped for it because I love holiday horror and it's going to be set during the Christmas time. So I'm going to pre-order that one. I'm waiting for that adventure. Sad to see that I'm going to have to say goodbye to it though. In November, I participated in the Cryptid Readathon. I was going to explore the genre of monster romance in the process because I thought, okay, I found out at this point that I was really into romance and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is something that might work for me. I have somebody I love to watch on YouTube here, Spicy Cats, reading tons of monster romance. They're kind of like my little like monster romance guru. So I thought, okay, maybe this is something that could work for me because it's the perfect blend of spooky horror, but diluted with that light and fluffy touch that is romance. You'd be surprised to know maybe that there is a lot of cryptid romance books out there on KU. I started off with I'm in Love with Mothman, which is pretty iconic, by Paige Lavoie, and then I got to the Billionaire Cryptid series, and these are my favorite monster romance books by far that I've ever read. They have the same kind of formula, but it's cool because the male monster love interests are 3 friends and they get their own individual books as well as their own happily ever afters. And this is all happening in a world where it's totally commonplace for these cryptids to be running amok. I'm still learning what works for me when it comes to monster romance. The author, Luna Cantrip, really does development of relationships in ways that like are very believable and authentic as much as that is possible in a monster romance story. It just feels so real, and I appreciate that about this author. The first book focuses on a Bigfoot. The second one has a Mothman character, and the third one that has yet to release as I'm filming this video today, it's going to be about the Loch Ness Monster. So I'm eagerly waiting, anticipating that third installment. I kind of count this series all as one. I don't know if that's cheating, but whatever. There's no rules here. And this really taught me that, I mean, for one, I love monster romance. And for 2, it's okay for me to love things that I never thought I'd be loving, right? Like I feel like I had this idea of what romance was in my head. And I just feel like as I get older here and as I'm experimenting and exploring different genres, I just think different genres are perfect for you at different times in your life. I really just wanted somebody to be having a happily ever after in my life. If not me, then these fictional characters, because things have been rough for myself and so many other people this past year that it's interesting to see how my wish fulfillment comes out in the things that I read or that I watch. Speaking of new genres I've fallen in love with, I found a cozy fantasy book that I absolutely adored. I know you're probably thinking Legends and Lattes, but no, it is actually Can't Spell Tea Without Treason by Rebecca Thorne. I read this book, I think, right after the Halloween season. I was really struggling with a huge reading slump. Like, I'm not used to being that hard up for finding books to enjoy and connect with, but I guess books that are set within Halloween are hard to come by that I enjoy. So I was looking for something, anything. And for some reason, while I was at the library picking up some holds that had come in, I saw the cover of this and I'm like, yes, I need this vibe. This is exactly what I want. This story follows the journey of two women who start a tea shop that also includes a little bookstore as well. When we meet these two women, they are already in a committed relationship, which is kind of fun for me. I feel like I've always, up to this point, read romance novels where we meet the characters on the page and then it's like, will they, won't they, is kind of the trajectory of the plot. In this case, they're deeply, madly committed to each other. And the plot instead centers around how can they stay together when you have all of these outside forces almost trying to like pull them apart. The tension really exists in both of these women running away from their work obligations. So there is a slight bit of commentary on how they should be relating to work, like what's the purpose of work and what really is most important to fulfilling their passions and being satisfied with their lives. So it does kind of give you the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop vibe, but not as intense. I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I read Legends and Lattes almost immediately after finishing this one, and I preferred this one better. I already have the second book in the series on hold for me at the library, so I'm gonna be starting that this winter because it does feel like a good wintry read where you're just slowing down, you wanna read some chunky books by the fire ambiance and just immerse yourself in a world where it's a guaranteed happily ever after. And those are all of my top books of 2024. What a journey. I just love how I did not anticipate reading and loving these books at the start of the year. It gets me super hyped for all that I will discover about myself and my reading life in the coming new year. I'd love to know, what are your big surprises from the past year in terms of the books that you picked up and enjoyed? What were some of your favorites, whether you predicted them to be or not? I'd absolutely love to know. If you're looking for more spooky, cozy hobby lifestyle content, definitely be sure to subscribe. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!